Thank you and good afternoon. It's always great to be in Saudi, my second home, and I mean that not just figuratively, I mean it literally. My wife is from Saudi, and my kids sometimes say words I have trouble understanding because of the accent, but it is what it is. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is just an umbrella term, and I'll let the panel experts talk to you more about getting more into depth about it. But basically, it's the brain's ability to adapt and change based on experience. Now, that experience can be through traumatic brain injury, which can lead to functional changes. So, for example, one part of the brain is not working properly, another one takes its place. Or it can be structural through learning. I've been involved in this field generally for a long time as a practitioner, licensed in a few countries, seeing patients, helping them change the way they think and therefore learn new ways in which to adapt. Through my app, Tuhoon, which has 16,000 active weekly users, most of whom are in Saudi and Kuwait and Qatar, places where I'm licensed to practice. But also on a global scale with something called the 99 Superheroes I created to change how Islam was being perceived, but in a subtle way that was on Cartoon Network and Netflix, one of the first IP from the region to go global. But as I learned working with Hollywood writers, show, don't tell. So I'm going to show you how this works and help you change the function or the structure of your brain in terms of how to deal with stress and other things, and let the brilliant panelists tell you how it's done. So I'm going to talk to you about cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically is to summarize, is how do I change the way I think to change the way I feel? How do I go from an unhealthy negative emotion to a healthy negative one, not positive? So before I continue, I want you each to think about something that bothered you recently. It can be something that made you angry or anxious or depressed or feel guilty. It doesn't matter, you can keep it to yourself. I can't read minds, so I won't know. But the idea basically is at the end of the session, in a few minutes, I'm going to teach you how to think about these things in a way to be able to function better in your lives. Okay, and start that idea of kind of getting your brain to think differently, which is the beginnings of neuroplasticity through learning. So it's based on ideas known to humanity for thousands of years. For example, Epictetus used to say that things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Shakespeare said the same, pretty much. So the idea here is that it's based on a principle called the ABC, and the beginnings of it goes the following. It's not your colleague or your manager or your significant other or your child that made you feel angry or depressed or anxious. It's you. You take responsibility for it. And the reason for that is as long as you say, I feel this way because of somebody else, you'll never be in control of your feelings. And if you're never in control of your feelings, you're always going to be reacting. It's going to be you're going to fight or flight. We want to open up the things in the middle. We want to be able for you to become an actor in your life, not a reactor. Okay? So it's based on a principle called the ABC. The A is the thing that happens. For example, my manager didn't give me, or let's make it closer to tech in the conference. My child, won't get off his iPhone, right? And I'm feeling angry because of that, or I'm feeling anxious about their future, right? So you say, if my child wasn't on their phone, I wouldn't be anxious, right? So there's something we call the 100-person rule, which goes like this. If 100 parents' child was doing the same thing, would all 100 feel anxious like me? Probably not. So the question becomes, what am I telling myself that's amplifying it? So look at what's called my irrational belief, okay? Now, for the purposes of this, an irrational belief is anything that leads to being angry or anxious or feel guilty or feel depressed, okay? So we ask ourselves 4 things. We look at 4 things in an irrational belief. The first is a demand, okay? So the idea is that my child shouldn't be on the phone. Okay? It's okay to want what you want. That's absolutely fine. But when you demand something outside your control, and by definition, somebody else's behavior is always outside your control, you become either angry or anxious or both. So we learn to change the demand to a preference. I wish my child wasn't on the phone. It would be preferable if it came off, but not must or should. So I don't leave what I want. I don't demand it to happen. The second is frustration and tolerance. I can't stand it. My child shouldn't be on the phone. I can't stand it. Okay? We change I can't stand it to I don't like it, but I can stand it. Typically, when people are asked to rate how they're feeling, they'll give you a 7, 8, 9 out of 10. So typically what's done in this, you ask yourself, well, what if at the same time my child is on the phone and I was getting angry, I get a phone call, God forbid, telling me somebody I love is dying. What happens then? Typically, it goes down. Okay? So I learned to say that things are not horrible, terrible, awful. They're bad, not horrible. And the 4th thing is rate behaviors, not people. So when I say, for example, I have a bad child, I have a child who might have done a bad thing. So I have 6 boys. Okay? And so when I give this talk in the US, they say, what about the girls? I say, we don't talk about them. I don't have any girls. If I did, I'd tell you. Okay? So number 3 is 22. He's always getting into trouble still. But as a teenager, I'd get angry at him a lot. So, he shouldn't be acting this way. It's terrible. I can't stand it. What a bad kid. So I get angry. So I asked myself 3 questions I want you to learn backwards. Question 1 is, does thinking that way help me? Not is it right or wrong, the behavior is wrong. But if I think that way, I'll get angry. If I get angry, I'm going to fight with him. It's not going to help me. Question 2, who says my son shouldn't act that way? Me. Well, who are you? I'm his father. Well, so what? Internal dialogue. Question 3, is it logical teenage boy is going to act sane? All teenagers are crazy. Okay? So since it failed that test, we changed it to, I wish my son didn't act that way, not he shouldn't. I don't like it, but I can stand it, not I can't stand it. He's a boy who did a bad thing, not a bad boy. And now instead of being angry, I'm annoyed. And now I deal with the situation in a way, I still punish him, but not as a reaction. It's not fight or flight, which is typically what we do. Now sometimes, the A and the C are both emotions. So I get angry, and I become angry that I'm angry. Or I become anxious that I'm anxious, which can lead to a panic attack. Or I become depressed that I'm depressed. So when I was growing up, my parents sent me to a summer camp in New Hampshire. Thus the accent. Okay? So my kids go there now. When I go visit them, the guy who took care of me, his name is Chuck. He's going to turn 80 years old in June. He still lives in the forest. So when I go visit, I can't sleep in a hotel. He won't let me because he helped raise me. So I sleep in his cabin. It's nice. I wake up. I feel like I'm 8 again. But 10 years ago, I missed a step. There were only 5 of them. I missed a step, and I shattered my ankle. I had 3 surgeries, and ended up, a year in a wheelchair. Came back to Kuwait, where I'm from. And I had to build the muscles back up, had to learn how to walk, how to balance, how not to limp, and it still hurts. It's not ouch, but when I'm teaching at the medical school, when I teach, I pace and I feel pain. I'll be like, God, I shouldn't feel this pain. What do you think happens to the pain when I do that? Right? It goes up. So there's a difference between the pain I feel and how I feel about the pain. The pain I feel is not in my control. My leg will hurt me for the rest of my life. How I feel about it is. Okay, so basically that's the principles I want to teach you. I would advise. So if you're interested in kind of learning more about this, there's a recorded stuff on Tuhoon, on the app Tuhoon, Tuhoon. So in practicing this kind of thinking, it's like a language. Eventually, you get to a situation where you won't be as reactive. And I'll end before introducing the brilliant panelists to talk to you more about the concept. I'll end with a story about how it helped me. So I'm licensed in 6 countries. One of the countries neighboring I go to once a week, and I was in line in the passport control. And I either wear this or a T-shirt. I don't wear a qatra. My accent won't allow it. But I was standing in line in the T-shirt in the Khaliji line, and there's this woman who's much taller and much wider. She was barreling towards the line. And when you're sitting in a car and there's a truck coming. The truck's going to stop. Why wouldn't it stop, right? Why would I be scared? The truck didn't stop. Okay? I got an elbow on my side. I got a shfikim benchir, like I'm in the wrong line, and she took my place. Now, so the passport control people in this country are so thin, when they turn sideways, you can't see them anymore, right? And they're waiting for me to react, and I could have reacted. Yeah, I had every right to be upset, but if I got angry, all it took is one video on social media to say, Dr. Naif does anger management, ha, ha, ha. Right? But if she's like that, what's her husband like outside? Right? So the question is not, is it right or wrong that I'm thinking in a particular way? The question always is, does it help me or hurt me to think in that way? So hopefully I planted the seed for neuroplasticity, and you'll be changing the way you think to change the way you feel. And now if you'll help me to welcome our brilliant panelists to discuss this further. Dr. Michael Rich, the founding director of Digital Wellness Lab and Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. Jonathan Garner, the founder of Mind Over Tech. And Benoit Bediou, a researcher from the University of Geneva. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much. Before we delve into this discussion, let's make sure that we're all on the same page. I did the showing. Now it's your turn to do the telling, even though you were in film yourself, so I took that away from you as well. Can you please provide us just a brief neuroplasticity 101 for us to all be on the same page before delving into the concept? Doctor.
Oh, well, as a pediatrician, I'll start at birth. But basically, if we think about the human brain as what we're here to talk about today, essentially, and the interfaces between screens and that brain. The human brain is the seat not only of our thinking, but of our feeling. It's our mind, it's our heart, and it's our soul, ultimately. The interesting thing is we are born with all of the neurons we're ever going to get, 86 billion of them. But one of the reasons that we humans, at least theoretically, rise to the top of the animal kingdom is not because we have opposable thumbs, because the higher primates all have opposable thumbs and opposable toes, by the way. We don't have the biggest brain, nor do we have the most neurons in our cortex. But one thing we do have, and is one of the things that gets us in trouble with screens, is that we're social beings. We seek out each other. We're greater with each other. Sometimes that turns against us when we tribalize, but we are stronger together. But one of the great things that allows us to rise to the top also is that we are born helpless. We are born not able to get food, not able to stay warm. We need others to take care of us, but that means we get to build this in response to this, whereas other animals have primitive reflexes to cling to mommy's fur or find the nipple. And so our process of growing up is about synaptic development, connecting all those neurons, but it's also about pruning away neurons, taking synapses away to improve our signal-to-noise ratio. This process takes a long, long time, up to the mid to late 20s. In fact, for our prefrontal cortex, our center of executive function. And so when the teenage son wraps the family car around the tree and dad yells at him, "Don't you have a brain?" the correct answer is, not that part. In fact, the people who figured out how late our prefrontal cortex develops was not the neuroscientists, but the car rental companies.
Thank you. So since we start off with childhood, Ben, you've worked on recent studies showing interactive media use during childhood and adolescence can interfere with aspects of cognitive, affective, and social development, to quote, with profound and long-lasting consequences. What are these consequences, and what role does neuroplasticity have to play here?
So what we've been studying in terms of digital media is especially video gaming. So we've been looking at how people game and how it impacts their cognitive functioning especially. So when we study the effect of digital media, as we've been hearing a lot here, there are effects on health, there are effects on social relationships. Our studies have been focusing on cognitive functioning. So what we've seen is, and this was an incidental discovery actually by my supervisor, Daphne Bavelier, people who play games, who play commercial games, so not games for training or for studying, especially some kind of games, we've seen that these people were outperforming others in terms of memory, attention, problem solving, or other domains of cognitive functioning. So this again was just looking at people who game and people who don't game. What we've been doing then was to take people who don't play games, put them in front of games for some time, and measure their performance before and after. And what we see is that we can causally attribute some types of gaming with some cognitive benefits.
What's the time lapse between the pre and post test? Is it one game? Is it a few months of the game?
So yeah, that's a very important question. So actually, when we do these kind of intervention studies, how we call them, we take people who don't game, we give them games to play an hour per day, 5 days per week for up to 10 or 15 weeks. We don't ask them to play 20 hours a day. This is not sane, this is not healthy. So we know that for the principles of learning are based on proper sleep, proper hygiene, and so on. So that's what we want to make sure that our participants are following. So we give them games just for some time, some days, and what we've seen is from 10 to 50 hours distributed over weeks, we get long-lasting effects that can last for up to 3 years, what we've been measuring, just because after 3 years, we just don't reach out to the participants who were first included in our studies. But we can see benefits from playing some games compared to others. So that's also an important part, because when we were studying these games, we were studying first-person shooter games. So these are games that are not really popular in the press, especially after every shooting in the US. We hear that a lot of people who play these games, well, when there is a shooting, usually we hear a lot about violent games in the press. The problem is that these games are very popular. So everybody plays these games, and it's not because they are playing these games that they become violent. So what we've seen is that people who play these games, they actually have better attention, better memory, better cognitive functioning than people who play other games. And that's an important aspect of the studies.
Interesting. So to bring this back to digital habits, Jonathan, your organization, Mind Over Tech, focuses on training the adults to shape their digital habits. What's your sense of kind of these habits that are being measured by Ben and his team, and what are digital habits? Why are they important? And if you can reflect on kind of what we were just hearing from Ben as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we're here these 2 days talking about digital well-being, but once we leave this stage, once we leave this beautiful building and go home, where does digital well-being actually happen? And it happens in all these small moments in our day. That time that you decide just to swipe and watch one more movie in Reels, or that time that you decide to use a smartphone instead of a dumb phone, or the time that you decide to check your emails when actually you're with your kids and you don't need to be doing it. There's all these tiny little moments. And this is really just behavior, right? Habits are behavior automated, done in this way. And habits can be amazing. Like, we need habits to survive in the world, but also we're human and we can develop bad habits as well. And I think the interesting thing with digital behavior, so digital habits I would talk about is automated behavior in our digital lives. The thing, as we've heard a lot today, is the dangers of technology is that corporations design technology in a way that creates habitual use in us. Basically, whose habits are they? Are they ones that we've chosen and decided to do, or are they ones that have been planted as a kind of a Trojan seed within us? So for me, digital habits is our automated behavior. Could be good or bad. Why we would want to change our digital habits? Well, we spend up to a third of our waking life using our phones. I'm not saying we should use them less. Studies against screen time don't really hold up. But what I'm saying is we should make every minute of that count. We should make all of those digital behaviors as intentional as possible. And really, in order to do that, it requires some work using our mind in the way that you've actually spoken about, kind of actively engaging our mind to develop these habits within us. Mo, earlier this morning, was talking about, with regulation, we can never really hope for regulation to solve this problem for us. We've been talking about this is a relationship with technology, and we're part of that relationship. We have a responsibility too. So I think in that sense, actually, I think what Mo talked about was we need awareness of our behavior, but also really to be intentional, to make decisions that we've reflected on critically and thought about, and actually make sure that our behavior in our digital lives is aware and intentional. So at Mind Over Tech, we don't talk about good or bad digital habits, because everyone's needs from technology are different. But really what we talk about is intentional habits. Is your actions in your digital life happening by accident? Or are they actually aligned with your goals and things that you're doing on purpose? Yeah.
So I can sound really smart, or I can tell the truth. So I'll tell the truth. So it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is basically something I found out from you when we were in the speakers room, that you had 20 years of working in mindfulness. And it sounds like you're asking, and also this amazing digital habit lab that I saw, which makes me feel very conscious about my posture now and my phone use, planted some thoughts in my head. But how did your practice of mindfulness inform what you're doing today?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say, I don't know, maybe lots of other people that are working in this field have this, that whenever you go and you speak to someone and they get on their phone, they're like, oh, I shouldn't be on my phone, I'm around you, like a digital well-being person, as if I'm perfect. But actually, I struggle with this just as much as anyone else. And I think my own journey kind of with mindfulness continues to be one of self-discovery. I think what we're talking about really here is developing awareness, critical thinking skills. A lot of these are developed through mindfulness practice. And I think these kind of meta skills are hugely important on this. And with that, anyone who's I'm not a good practitioner in terms of mindfulness and meditation, but generally, it's not something that you ever complete. It's a practice. It's called a practice for a reason. It's something that we keep doing over time. So I think it's my opinion that we can never have a perfect relationship with technology. It's always going to be flawed. However, it can be better than it is. And that's really down to actually doing the inner work, applying the technology of our minds, because our minds are incredible, taking this neuroplasticity that we're talking about and working it to its advantage so that we are rewiring our brains so that our habits are ones that we've considered and are actually serving us and not going against us.
You know, I did a training program in mindfulness and decided not to practice as a practitioner because it would be so unauthentic of me to practice. Because I mean, I'm going to be calm 30 years after I die, I think, you know. But coming back to you, Doctor. So you're in media, you're in film, and you're a pediatrician, and I love that you're called the mediatrician. Was that? Did you call yourself that? Somebody else call you that? And please tell us a little bit about your book, The Mediatrician's Guide. Really love the name.
Oh, True confessions, the mediatrician is one of those ideas you have in the shower, right? Because there are no phones ringing, there's nobody asking you any questions, you get to actually think. So that's my form of mindfulness, I think. Actually, one of the things I say in the book about mindfulness is instead of seeking out killer apps, we should be developing our killer bees. And there are 3 of them. Actually, there are 4 of them, I'm sorry. But the first is be mindful in our use of screens and technology and in turning them off when they're not the best tool for the job. The second is to be balanced in our time. And in fact, screen time limits never really worked, even in the era of television when they were developed. Now, I don't think we can effectively measure screen time because we move seamlessly in and out of screens. So being balanced is now about intentional non-screen time in our day. Times when we get away from the screens and go for a walk or have a family meal together without devices, etc. And the third, which is really important for parents, is be present. You know, when the parents are out of the room, I'll often ask the kids, what can your parents do better? Almost always the first thing out of their mouth is pay more attention to me. You know, and the parents are saying, he never talks, she never does anything with us, etc. And the kids are saying, wait, but we want to be heard, we want to be seen, but on our terms. And the fourth and the most important one in some ways is we've got to be bored. We have to bring back boredom. We have gotten into a terrible habit of pulling our phones out no matter what, on this, you know, in an elevator, on the bus. And boredom is the crucible of curiosity, creativity, imagination, not just because it gives us the space to think about these things, but because it's kind of uncomfortable. And so we fill it with new ideas. But the origin of the book is actually because we've been in this atmosphere of being fearful of the screens and how they're ruining our kids' lives and simultaneously guilty that we're letting our kids have them. And as we've discussed earlier today, no good decision is made out of fear. And guilt is a waste of energy and time. And so the Mediatrician's Guide, a joyful approach to raising healthy, smart, kind kids in a screen-saturated world, is really an owner's manual for your digital native, in a sense. And it's broken down in very simple ways. It's what goes on in terms of human development in the screens, so what, addressing all of the things people are fearful about, from violence to body image and eating disorders to depression and anxiety. And then now what? Looking forward, how do we go into it? And so it's really meant as both a reassuring text, and some people have said it's like Dr. Spock for Mr. Spock, in the sense that it looks at the arc of child development, looks how parents are important to that. It also examines the fact that we will never be perfect at parenting. That doesn't mean we can't keep perfecting it.
So speaking of fear, Ben, in a recent article you talked about, you know, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, alarmist discourses that have often surrounded tech developments. Based on the current science, can we actually say anything concrete, whether screens are good for you or bad for you?
it's always difficult to answer in a polarized way to these kind of questions. I would say that, as we all know, things can be good or bad depending on how you use them, and that's the same for video games and for any kind of other technology. And the thing is, games were made for pleasure, for fun, and kids learn things from games. So that's what people have discovered, and that's what frightens people. We tend, as parents, when we see our kids play, and especially for the games that we've studied by chance again, we tend to see one aspect of the game, which is the violence. It's a first-person shooter. They are shooting at other characters. They are learning something bad. When you actually, the parents sitting and spending time with the kids, when you actually spend time with kids playing these games, they actually enjoy the challenge and the difficulty and being able to not be shot and to catch the loot box or whatever they want to, like their health and their survival. So they're not approaching these games in the same way as we are approaching them. And I think they are learning good things from some games, but it's very important to be mindful about why they play, how they play, and again, a day is 24 hours, so we don't want them to be learning by playing games 20 hours over a day. So I would say there is positive in games, and a lot of positive, but it has to be framed and supervised and discussed and weighted against other activities as well.
So Jonathan, just to segue from what he's saying to you, I mean, you work with adults mostly, and he's talking about kids and adolescents. These experiences, working with adults, what have these experiences taught you about the importance of engaging with children on the subject?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is, when we run our kind of workshops with adults, the first thing that becomes really clear is there's a huge need for this with children. One of the first, every session that we run, everyone comes running up at the end and says, my kids really need this, So, definitely that's felt. And the first thing I'd say is there are so many amazing resources out there already. I mean, at the Boston Children's Lab, just such great resources online. I met for the first time, I think it's Digital Awareness UK. We've got Emma and Charlotte here as well. They've got, great things going on. Just to name, some of the people here, there's loads of great resources. I think the position that we take at Mind Over Tech is very much, well, first of all, that our skills really lie in training adults. But I think the other thing is that the kind of research is increasingly showing, and I think this was nicely reflected in Sync's kind of global survey recently, that actually one of the key things that we can do to help with children is to role model good behavior. And, kids, unfortunately, don't do what they're told. They do what they're kind of, they emulate and do what they see. So if we're really invested in actually the digital well-being of our children, it's really our belief that if you're not doing the work with your own digital habits, to model good behavior, but also to be part of that discussion, because digital kind of well-being, adopting good digital habits is not, especially in a family context, that it shouldn't be done in isolation. You shouldn't say, well, this is, as a kid, you need to get better at this. It's like, this is, you have the culture of your family. You need to be having discussions. You need to be having debate. You need to be playing video games with your kids and understanding what it's coming from, for them. So I think in this sense, actually taking responsibility for yourself as an adult to work on your own digital habits in order to role model good behavior. And I think also to really acknowledge that every generation has a different challenge. We're talking about kids, but even with adults, when we work with organizations, there's like, grads coming in at Gen Z and then people that are kind of at leadership level. And every generation has their own different set of digital well-being, digital habits challenges. So I think working on your own, but actually trying to teach everyone those metacritical thinking skills so that they can deal with whatever novel challenges come their way is really the main point. Yeah.
Thank you. So Dr. Michael, back to you. So part of your research at the Digital Wellness Lab is to inform the tech and media industries of the effects of young people's engagement with the digital ecosystem, particularly with regards to mental, social, and emotional health. What changes would you like to see at an industry level here to make sure that future generations reap the profits of this?
Well, as a pediatrician and as a parent, I don't think we have the time to wait for legislation, regulation, or litigation to make this a better environment. There are kids growing up and learning right now that we have to be there for. So one of the things that I really look at is how can we all do better by the kids right now? As the Hopi elders said at the turn of the millennium, we are the people we're waiting for. And we need to make those changes. And I totally want to echo what Jonathan just said about modeling. It's really important. And I talk about the 3 M's. Model the behavior you want to see in your kids, because they do hear about 1% of what we say and 100% of what we do. Mentor them. As Ben says, sit down next to them and do the game with them, play the game with them as they learn it. The great thing about being a mentor is you learn as much from the mentee as the mentee learns from you. A lot of parents resist this because they like to be the experts in situations. Believe me, your kid will be the expert on the game. You will never win. But when you then finally figure out how to steal a car in Grand Theft Auto, and you turn to your child and you say, now I finally figured this out, let's talk a little bit about why you might want to practice this over and over again. You're coming from a very different place. And then the 3rd M is to monitor, to be present in their digital lives, because they spend as much or more of their waking hours in the digital space as they do in physical space. And it's really important to be, not to follow everything that they do, but to be able to, because their behavior will change as a result.
You know, one time with a patient of mine was brought for an internet kind of addiction, and I'm not somebody who plays many games, but so I said to him, I said, so you like playing the games? Right? And he said, no, it's like this now. I'm like,
You're back in the Atari age.
Exactly.
I do want to address one word that you use, though, is addiction, and that's been thrown around a lot today. One of the things that we found at the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders, which I think is still the only dedicated clinical program at an academic medical center that's really looking at those kids who've gone down the rabbit hole of gaming, of social media, of pornography, or what we call information binging, is I think addiction's a bad model for this in a whole bunch of ways. Not the least of which is that it is stigmatizing. Addicts are somebody to be pitied and or punished. Parents don't see their kids as addicts until the kid looks for all the world like they are one, which are way down the slippery slope. But if we think about addiction as use of a pleasurable but unnecessary substance or behavior that continues despite negative consequences, and our therapeutic goal is abstinence. With interactive media, it's a very different thing. We need this. This is a necessary behavior. We need to do it well. It does continue despite negative consequences, but our goal is self-regulation. So we actually see it more akin to binge eating disorder, who you don't have them stop eating, but you have them learn to integrate it and to control it in their lives. So I think words really matter here, and particularly ones that are stigmatizing, that make both the parents and the kids feel bad and not get better.
So Ben, focusing on the positive, I mean, you've talked about how the potential to support development like identity formation, social skills, community building, and obviously being seen as an addict is an identity formation if it's done in the wrong way. If we're going to be optimistic about this, what are the positive effects that emerging technologies can have on cognitive skills?
So we've seen a lot of positive effects so far, but on cognitive skills. And what we're still missing is games that train more metacognitive skills or more self-regulatory skills. And what the kids are facing is they are facing games that are very rewarding, very demanding, very emotionally engaging, but at a time where they don't have the capacity to control all these impulses, basically, and all these strength in their brain. So having games that train them these abilities to self-regulate, to even perspective taking would be an important thing, like for some of the social interactions that take place in these games. Because now video games are not only games, they are also social environments, so they are ecosystems. And I think there's a slow migration of games, social media, and other digital tools to, there was a hype about the metaverse a few years ago, and I think it's just showing that we use technology for good things, for recreation, for connection, for communication, and so on. But some people just get out of control of that because it's rewarding, because it's interesting, because it's accessible, and so on. So what we would like would be to build games, or we are not building games, we're researchers, but we would like the industry to build games that are actually training these abilities in the kids when they will need them later. So that's where we will see the benefits for the long run on brain plasticity as well, because I think that's also this period of age, especially adolescence, is really where the frontal cortex gets wired properly. And I think this is when they need risk-taking, they need a lot of novelty experiences. So having games that slowly train their abilities to regulate, to control, and to have metacognitive skills, to be able to think about themselves, think about what they are doing, why they are doing it, how they are doing it, and how long, and so on. I think this is critical for the future of the youngest generation.
Thank you. Jonathan, just to jump off of that, in developing your approach to revising digital well-being, you looked at self-help literature and aspects of neuroscience. What's the importance of neurogenesis, or the birth of new neurons? Where does it sit in the process you've described as inner digital transformation?
Yeah, I think inner digital transformation is a phrase that I was using a few years ago, because I guess digital transformation, just to be clear, obviously the mass adoption of digital technology. I have a background as a developer and a tech educator. I've spent years training leadership teams about kind of machine learning and blockchain and so on. And what we've really seen, all of the amazing things from technology, this mass adoption of technology, digital transformation. The inner digital transformation is really kind of what I refer to as what we're talking about here, kind of how our brain is changing. I think it was Marshall McLuhan who said, we shape our tools and then they shape us. And it's very much that now that we all have these amazing tools in our hands, actually our digital habits, the way that we use them regularly, the way that we do that, they will shape our inner environment. And so actually, for me, this inner digital transformation is really about harnessing this neuroplasticity, like I said before, and making sure that what we're doing is really adopting neural pathways, habits which are really serving us. And I think for me, what's really interesting here is, like within the positive psychology kind of sphere, I think it was Martin Seligman who was really talking about, when he first started, he really thought that everything he was doing would help bring people to kind of states of happiness. But what he really realized was the kind of first sets of skills, at best, got people back to zero. They got them back to a point of being kind of just not depressed or okay. And that actually to push through to these states of happiness is a whole other set of skills in themselves. And I think that what we're talking about here, these kind of metacognitive skills, self-awareness, critical thinking and reflection, it turns out these are the exact skills we need to gain a better relationship with our tech. And for me, the amazing opportunity here, because there's great risk, right? We've talked about this paradox and this dilemma all day. But the great risk is, I don't have my phone on me. No, I do here. So like this, this thing can be a source of distraction, a source of anxiety, all sorts of things. However, if I'm interested in my relationship with it, and I become curious about how I use it, about how I'm intentional with it, the skills that I develop to do that, those are the skills which are going to benefit me in my life outside of technology. And then this becomes a mirror and a tool which can lift me as a person way beyond my connection with technology. And for me, that's the inner digital transformation. It's actually the beauty of working with our digital habits as a way to grow as humans and learn more about ourselves ultimately. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And my wife was happy. You're going to speak on a panel. You won't be buying anything, no clutter. But I'm going to end up buying a copy of your book and a copy of the Digital Habit Lab. So she won't be happy with you. Yeah. But thank you for your very time. Thank you for...
You were mentioning the fully embraced boredom. That's one of the experiments in the deck there.
I'm going to make T-shirts. Bring back boredom.
Yeah. There you go. Thank you very much for your time. Brilliant panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.